is 1953. You're shopping for the week's groceries at your local supermarket. You happen upon shelf after shelf of pre-packaged, long-lasting foods, convenience foods. A few years prior, this wouldn't have been the case, but the world post-World War II is different. In this video, we will be exploring the rise of convenience foods in American households and how it managed to make its way into the kitchens of American housewives in regards to gender roles and consumerism. So, what is a convenience food? In early 21st century terms, we may think of fast food chains, takeaway, home delivery services, etc. as convenient and therefore convenience foods. However, that description is not apt for the mid-20th century. So what is it really? Convenience foods, or tertiary processed foods, is pre-packaged food that requires little to no preparation and is generally mass-produced with long shelf life. This includes TV dinners, canned foods like fruit, tuna, spam, and jello. So let's talk about this a little more while making a recipe for jello salad I found from the 1950s. It makes use of two of my personal favorite icons of American convenience foods, and I feel really embodies the phrase as well. I found this recipe from American Table, and it is how to from a Dole pineapple advertisement from the 1950s. The advert was carried in multiple magazines like Ladies' Home Journal and Women's World. A quick background on convenience foods. Prior to World War II, canned goods were common but were not widely used as a primary source of nutrition. This was also due to the fact that processed foods were more expensive than fresh food. However, following the industrial boom of post-World War II America, everything changed. The USA was looking to industrialize its gastronomical experiences. From advancements in technology like electric fridges and toasters to prepackaged foods, technological advancements were everywhere. Food and appliance advertisers almost immediately switched from patriotic wartime themes to celebrating the virtues of the American middle-class home and family, their new center of the market. America in the 1950s saw more middle-class citizens than they ever had before. Since 1941, Americans' real incomes had risen steadily, and so had the proportion of their budget spent on food. In 1941, the average American spent 22% of its income on food. In 1953, the figure was 26%. And a majority of this budget was spent on prepackaged foods. Better Home and Gardens magazine said that canned whole meals, using technology developed by the Army, would soon be commonplace on home shelves, along with canned hamburgers, frozen coffee, and frozen grapes. They only started entering the market post-World War II and were initially met with hesitation from American wives. However, by the 1950s, they had completely taken over the kitchens of these women. Straight after the war, these women were tasked with keeping their men happy. They were given the responsibility to rehabilitate these men who had faced the horrors of war and create a home environment so loving and easy for them that they would feel safe and at ease. The only kitchen chores expected of men were carving the turkey at Thanksgiving and Christmas and drying the dishes. Outside the home, most gourmet chefs were men, and so were almost all the leaders of the food industry, but it was very different inside the homes of virtually every American. The idea of women being integral to the kitchen was everywhere. From movies and television to magazine and advertisements, popular culture at the time really pushed the notion that food preparation was central to a woman's role in binding family ties. So much so that Vogue magazine in 1950 even wrote an article that insinuated that women who did not cook well were nervous, unstable types who would probably end up on a psychiatric's couch. Yikes. The middle class also gave rise to more women in the workforce than ever before. By 1953, 30% of housewives worked, as compared to 24% in 1941. In 1957, 22 million women were working full-time, 32% of the labor force, and over half of them, 12 million, were married. By 1960, there were twice as many working wives as there had been in 1950, and the number of working mothers has increased by 400%. Before the war, a vast majority of these working women had been working class, but by the 1950s, half of them were middle class. Despite having roughly the same hours as men, they were still expected to take care of all their family's needs and have dinner ready at the table at a reasonable time. For this reason, food processors and advertisers recognized that these women represented an excellent market for convenience food. They did not have the time to prepare balanced family meals, but could still afford to feed their families well. According to Ergmont Arns, a prominent industrial designer at the time, a large proportion of the convenience food market was made up of working women. From canned soup to frozen fingers and everything in between, the golden age of food technology was marketed towards liberating women from the kitchens. giving them more time to pursue other hobbies. This convenience food market was shifting the role of women from housewife to hostess. Even as marketing pushed this idea of the kitchen being the woman's special domain, technology gradually reduced the amount of time she needed to spend there. Like all good things, however, the age of highly processed convenience foods had to come to an end. In the 1950s, through popular media like magazines, they convinced women to embrace these technological advancements to make creating the perfect home easier. However, this golden age of food technology died down quickly by the 1980s because of diet fads that swept the country. Today, the phrase has changed to mean the convenience foods we know, like fast food chains and takeaway. Convenience food turned from a respectable meal that you could serve to guests to trashy, for lack of a better word, and unhealthy. But for one glorious moment, they created an impact on American social and cultural history that was so large that still, to this day, is stamped in our minds in a way that would be near impossible to forget its existence, or at least in the near future. On that note, the Jello pineapple has said, let's take a bite. This is so much sugar. Thankfully it's pineapple, so I feel like it's gonna cut out some sweetness. Yeah. So that bite was fine, because it was mostly just pineapple, but like really slimy covering. I mean, it's not bad. I did also buy canned corn, Spam, and tuna, but in hindsight, I feel like this might be enough processed foods for the day. I see why I get why it's not a thing anymore. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video.